ड्रेस कोड नहीं है।
टी-शर्ट पहन सकते कॉलेज में इसमें डाल देते आए पहनो ना जो भी पहनो
वही तो पूछ रहा हूँ।
ये पहनो एडिडास
टी-शर्ट थोड़ी पहनो,
नहीं पहनते
इतना थोड़ी।
ये ऐसी गंदी शर्ट मत पहनना बहुत गंदी शर्ट है नीचे ये पहनो
ये
हाँ ये पहनो ये अच्छी है
ये अच्छी वाइट पहन
ये पहन लो ना जी
अच्छी दिखती है।
हाँ बहुत अच्छी बट वीडियो में ये कलर्स दिखते हैं ना वीडियो में वाइट मत पहनो ये हाँ कॉटन वीडियो में वाइट मत पहनो ये अच्छी
Hi, Greta. How are you?
Namaste.
Namaste, Diwali. I made everyone a co-host so you can turn your videos on.
Okay. Nikunji, Suresh ji
Yes.
said that back end he said he will do it for Seattle meeting, not this one.
Oh, okay. Okay, got it.
He's not available today.
I thought he said that he could do the webinar. I'm not sure which one he was referring to. Maybe he was referring to the one in Seattle.
Yes.
Okay, got it. So you're good to spotlight everybody as we go?
Yep.
Okay. Do you have access to this?
See.
I'm going to make you host.
Okay.
Okay, so you have host now. And you can essentially change many different things there.
Let me see. So right now, whoever talks gets.
So let's say I'm talking right now, and you can hit the, where it says like, spotlight view or something, pin or spotlight view. I can't see it anymore because I gave you host permission.
I think I have to change it to A different view or something
No, click on the three dots at the top.
on the top. More.
No, yeah, right next to mute. If you hover over to the right side of your screen.
Mm-mm.
Okay, make me co-host, or make me host again. So I'll just take it from here. I'll
Okay.
show it to you. I can't explain now. We got 6 minutes, so it's
Yeah.
better. Did somebody turn up? Who pressed the button to go live? Somebody pressed the button to go live.
Not me.
Okay, somebody did. Anyways, can you make me host?
Should I
Please?
stop? Let me stop then. Stop.
Yeah, please. No. So don't stop anything. Let it be. Can you make me host?
Trying to figure that out. So the recording is in progress. Let me go to your name and make you host. Yes.
Yeah. Welcome. I'm glad you were able to join.
Nikunj, I'm all set now.
Okay, great. Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, Venerable Shimbo, that's Sunim. It's the first time, I
Yes.
guess, for everyone. But
Yes, exactly.
thank you for joining. So, yeah. And yeah, thank you. How are you, everyone? Greta. So I'm still eating a little lunch, so I'll be
It's okay.
excuse myself. I'm gonna turn off the mic. But
Nikunj, can you make me co-host, please?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Namaste, Swamiji. Welcome. All right, I think everyone can turn their videos on. I think everything should work now. We have a couple of more minutes left. So
we can take our photos together.
what's that?
Before we can take a photo together if everybody
Yes, we will.
here,
Yes,
before
absolutely.
we forget.
Before we start.
Possibly. But I
Can you,
don't know.
can you turn your video on? Yeah, here we go. Okay, perfect.
Yes,
So
that's everyone.
let Jeff come back and then we'll take a video. We'll take a picture.
Oh, that's true. Jeff is out.
He's back. Okay.
Hi, Jeff. So we take a
All right.
photo.
Let me. Everybody can look at the screen real quick and nice smile.
Okay.
1, 2, and let me make sure we got it.
Okay. Oops. I didn't do well, I guess.
All right. We'll take one more just in case. Okay, ready? 1, 2, and smile. All right. Good. It looks good.
Good.
We'll give it a couple of minutes before we get started.
And you couldn't, so I've got 20 minutes. Is that in, if there's any questions or anything, will we hold that to another time or
Towards the end, yeah.
of the end of everybody, not just my 20 minutes?
Yeah,
Okay.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct.
All right. Sounds good.
So that we don't interrupt the flow as we go forward.
That's fine. Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right.
Namaste and Swasti. My name is Nikunj Trivedi. I'm the president of CoHNA, or Coalition of Hindus of North America. We are a grassroots advocacy and civil rights organization promoting a better understanding of Hindu heritage and culture and working on matters that impact the Hindu community. You can learn more about us at www.cohna.org, COHNA.org. As a founding member of the Swastika Awareness Coalition, CoHNA, along with its partners, welcomes you to today's event, Swastika, an Interfaith Dialogue, distinguishing a symbol of peace from a symbol of hate. The swastika is one of the most sacred symbols currently used by nearly 2 billion followers of the Dharmic traditions of the world, such as Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. Similar symbols, known by various names in the native languages, are used by the Zoroastrian, Native American, Ancient African, and other traditions around the world. In many instances, the swastika has been misunderstood and maligned in the West by equating it with the Nazi symbol used by Hitler. This is a false association. Hitler was not inspired by Eastern symbolism and form of the swastika, but adopted and misappropriated a new type of crusade cross for Nazi Germany, which he referred to as the Hakenkreuz, or the hooked cross in German language, in association with anti-Semitism and hate. Even today, the German language refers to Hitler's symbol as the Hakenkreuz and not the swastika. The mistranslation and false association of the Hakenkreuz and the swastika has resulted in injustice towards nearly 2 billion followers of Dharmic and other native traditions who consider swastika and similar symbols, such as the manji, the whirling log, etc., as sacred and auspicious. We recognize and acknowledge the transgenerational trauma of the 6 million Jews, 1.5 million Romas, and others killed by Nazi persecution, and the chilling, intimidating effect of Nazi-inspired hatred on Jewish Americans, African Americans, and others even today. We also condemn and stand against hate and bigotry. Hindus have also been targets of neo-Nazis and those who support Nazi ideology. Yet, the important work of fighting bigotry and racism must not inadvertently stoke resentment against other religious traditions and minorities. It is imperative that we equip our children with proper knowledge about world religions and cultures so that they can develop the mutual respect and pluralism that must be the cornerstone of any multiracial, multi-ethnic, and inclusive society. After all, in America, we are able to clearly distinguish between the sacred cross and the hateful burning cross. So we must clearly distinguish and create opportunities and education to distinguish between the sacred swastika and the hateful Hakenkreuz, or hooked cross. In October 2022, spiritual leaders from the Hindu, Buddhist, and Native American traditions signed a historic swastika proclamation, which you can find on www.understandingswastika.org, to formalize a common understanding of the swastika among these religious communities about their cultural symbols, while standing in solidarity with the Jewish community and calling for greater education efforts to distinguish between the sacred swastika and the hateful Hakenkreuz. Earlier this month, the United Nations also celebrated Interfaith Harmony Week, which is a great time to promote mutual respect and peace among the world's religions and cultures, while denouncing hatred and bigotry. A proper and historically accurate understanding of the swastika, a sacred symbol that is over 10,000 years old, will go a long way to remove misconceptions, correct the false association with Hitler's Hakenkreuz, and allow space for communities to better appreciate the diverse world that we all live in. I therefore welcome all of you to this important event and welcome you to join our efforts in spreading education and awareness while promoting mutual respect. You can join the efforts by signing up as a volunteer for the Swastika Awareness Coalition at www.understandingswastika.org. With those opening remarks, I wanted to welcome everybody here. We have an esteemed panel of speakers and panelists who have a different background from different traditions that will be discussing various aspects of this important dialogue. But first, what I would like to do is play a short video of a documentary that is upcoming by Dr. T.K. Nakagaki, featuring Dr. T.K. Nakagaki, called Manji. So let me share my screen and we'll go right into it.
I don't see.
Yeah, I know. For some reason, I can't share my screen. I'm not sure what's going on. Okay, let me try one last time and then we'll move from here. Unfortunately, for some reason, I'm not able to share my, at least the sound. Let's see if this works. If somebody can tell me this is actually playing.
It's working.
Can you hear the sound?
They're supposed to have no sound in the beginning anyway.
Yeah.
But...
How about now?
No, I don't hear the sound.
Oh, no,
No sound? Okay, let's try again one last time and then for some reason it's not working. I don't know why. Dr. Nakagaki, maybe you can share from your side if that works for you.
The thing is, yeah. Well, I'm not prepared.
No, that's okay. So let me see if anybody else can share.
Well, I can bring it, the one that I have possibly from the...
Do you have a link? I can help.
I do have a link. Yeah, I'm gonna.
Oh, yeah. If that's the case, we can share. Maybe you can chat.
Yeah, I'm gonna put it on the chat exactly. So because from some reason it's not going to. Here's the link. Somebody can share that on your screen. I tested this earlier and it was working. For some reason, it's not working right now. Let me see.
Okay, let me share now. Do you want me to share now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nikunj bhai,
Yeah.
I am able to play it. Do you want me to?
Yeah, if you could do that, that'll be great.
Okay. Give me 1 second.
Yeah,
Are you showing now or you're not?
I can see it, but I can't hear your sound. So I think you have to optimize the sound. You have to show when you share screen, you have to optimize
My
sound.
name is Toshikazu Kenjutsu Nakagaki, so people call me TK as a initial part. And I myself was born in Japan, in
Is that
Osaka,
from
and I
Swamiji's
came to the United
desktop?
States
No, it's not.
1985. So
Okay.
that's mine. Actually, I live here.
Do you want me
about
to? Do you want to stop or what do you want?
Yeah, no, you can share it, but we can't see the video. Now we can see the sound, but the video is not coming.
Now, oh, video is not on.
Yes. And you can increase the screen size.
Yeah, I did. Is that? Do you see the video now?
No, not yet. But you know what? Let's, for the sake of time, why don't we move forward? We can
Just 1 second if I
Yeah,
can.
if you saw me, if you want to share, yeah. So, Dr. Nakagaki, if you want to just stop sharing.
I just share. Stop. I
My name is Toshikazu Kenjutsu Nakagaki, so people call me TK as a initial part. And I myself was born in Japan, in Osaka, and I came to the United States 1985.
Somebody's
So,
thing is playing it.
actually, I live here about
Yeah, it might still be playing from Dr.
country
Let me
United
see.
States.
Is that mine
So,
or?
yeah, I think it is yours. Yes. Now let
Okay,
me
here we
try
go. Now it's
sharing
not.
it.
Perfect.
Can you all see it?
Yep, it's coming up. Not yet. It's not there yet. It's a blank screen, so. Let me see.
I think the video is not working there.
There it is.
My name is Toshikazu Kenjutsu Nakagaki, so people call me TK. As a
Okay, it's working.
part. And
Can you all hear
I
it?
myself was born in Japan,
Yeah.
in Osaka, and I came to the United States 1985. So actually, I live here about 35 years in this country, United States. Right now, it seems like in terms of swastika or the Hakenkreuz, we just need a little more information available so that people can read and see. 一応じゃあここにあるその曼字っていうのは基本的には仏教のシンボルっていうような形で考えても全然問題はないっていう形。
Pretty shocked to see it here, to be honest with you. I didn't expect it to be in a temple of all places, or a shrine. I think just because it has such a negative connotation.
140年ぐらい前に、関東地域の かなり広範囲の地図を作りました。その時に地図記号を定めております。その後最初の時から卍の記号をこちらに使って
アメリカ人は何をもって自分をアメリカ人として見るか、日本人は何をもって日本人として見るかってところに考えたときに、日本人で結局まだ悲しいところ違うんですよね。でもアメリカ人って結局例えば朝とかに旗に忠誠を誓うとかそういうのあるですよね。だから旗が持つ意味って多分シンボルが持つ意味多分かなり日本人とは違う感覚持ってるから。
もう3000万人の外国の旅行者が日本に来ていただいてますし、オリンピックに向けておそらく数はどんどん増えていくと思いますので、だんだんこの卍の記号って何なのって思う方は増えてくるんだと思うんですね。その時にこういう背景がある、こういう歴史的な背景があるということを、やはりきちんと理解をしてもらうというのは大事だと思いますが。
The symbols require us to be careful. The hate crimes here in the city have increased immeasurably in the last couple of years, and now the swastika is being painted in all kinds of places. So I think it's important, particularly for Buddhists and perhaps more generally for many Asians, to understand what a provocative and negative symbol it is when used as part of white supremacy, white nationalism, anti-Semitism.
It was used as a trademark, or at least a supplementary mark for many products, because in history it represented good fortune, good luck, the four seasons, any number of more deeply symbolic and or spiritual things.
But to try and convince people who still are bearing the scars of that use of swastika, because whether Hitler called it that or not, if the last thing the person you love most in the world experienced was a person wearing that symbol, blowing their brains out, what they called it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. To them, it doesn't matter. And that, no, there's no maybe. That's the problem here. If in the end, historical reconstruction,
街を通して、じゃあもう少しそこにダイアログが生まれていく。だから対話が生まれていくっていうのが一番私としては大切なことで、その平和っていうのを私はずっと考えてきてるから、平和のシンボルっていうことはやっぱりどういうふうに相手を理解するか、お互いを理解していくかっていうのがすごく大切になってくると思うんで、だからそのシンボルをね、蘇らせることっていうのはある意味で人類の歴史をちゃんと蘇らさせてもらうことにもなるし、ヘイトクライムもどうやってできてるかもよくわかると思うんですけどね。
Thank you, Swamiji, for that. So that kind of gives you a little bit of perspective about kind of what the dialogue is and how such documentaries are actually creating dialogues for this important conversation. So with that, what I wanted to do is start introducing our first speaker. His name is Jeff Kelman. Jeff is a Holocaust historian currently based in New Hampshire. Kelman earned his MA degree in Holocaust Genocide Studies from Gratz College in 2021, with his master's thesis focusing on the symbolism of three major symbols: the swastika, the Hakenkreuz, and the Christian cross. Kelman's research worked to further understand the ways in which symbols may serve as potential inspiration for violent action. Jeff, pleasure to have you again. Please go ahead. Let me spotlight you. So,
excellent, and thank you, Nikunj. So I should be looking to share my screen here and just move some things out of the way. All right, can everybody see this here?
Yep.
Excellent. All right. So thanks again for that introduction. And I always have a great time speaking with CoHNA and all the good folks that CoHNA invites for these sorts of talks. This isn't the first time we've spoken about this important issue, but this is the first time I'm going to speak about it a little bit differently. I've given this sort of talk before, a little bit on the background, and this one I'm calling One Shape, Two Symbols, the swastika and the Hakenkreuz. A lot of this is based off of my master's research, but also based off of a lot of the conversations I've subsequently had with various different Jewish groups, synagogues, even Holocaust survivors and others on this subject matter, and the really growing understanding both within the Jewish community and otherwise within the understanding of the West. If you take only one thing really away from this talk, and I'll probably put a timer out here next to me just so that I don't go over. We've got about 20 minutes, and I want to make sure we stick roughly to that so everybody's able to chime in on this important issue. But if you take one thing really away from this today, I think it's important to understand that there really is a difference between shapes and symbols. Shape is an aesthetic form. It's just a basic piece. Symbols have meaning behind that. And when it comes to everything we're going to talk about here, there ought to be, as there are in the East, and in other parts, in much of the world, two words used for this: swastika and Hakenkreuz. And we'll get into all the details on that as we go here. So what I'm going to go through is a bit of the swastika versus Hakenkreuz, so that word use there differently, why this matters, of course, borrowing from the famous TED Talk of Simon Sinek and the idea of start with the why, right? And then some brief history of the swastika globally, swastikas in the West, especially in the pre-Nazi era, the history of the Hakenkreuz, Adolf Hitler symbol and then the Nazi usage, and then swastikas and the Hakenkreuz, the plural of Hakenkreuz as taken from the German today, and this understanding of a West versus East. And I have on here a Q&A, although we're actually going to hold that to the end for everybody else. So write down any questions that you might have, and I'm happy to dive down further into that as we go. All right. So, and as far as definitions are concerned, a really important piece here from a very simplistic standpoint, as I'm using these words throughout this talk, I'm going to be using swastika in a good, auspicious, benevolent sense there when that word is coming across. Hakenkreuz, from a negative, hateful standpoint, this is the bad component there. And then I believe it's important to introduce another word simply to talk about the shape if we're ever referring to that in these sorts of conversations. A lot of nuance can come into play, especially as we get beyond an initial emotional reaction and be able to look at this on a deeper level. And I think Gamadian works for that shape. That was the word that was used prior to 1871 broadly in a broad context. And then swastika and Hakenkreuz were used otherwise in different ways. But that's simply, if you see this geometric shape there, that's a neutral standpoint, simply referring to the aesthetic form, which comes from the Greek letter gamma, of which when you have four together, you had this shape. All right. So going to the why and who this impacts and why we care about it. Well, ultimately, there's millions of Hindus, millions of Buddhists and Jains and others, and even countless numbers of indigenous persons for whom this matters a great deal. Ultimately, to these various folks, this is a key component of their overall identity, and the self-censorship component can be really harmful there. It's one of the things we've encountered when talking to various Jewish groups about it is, well, we understand these differences and everything if you go through the talk, but what's the harm? And we'll get into that a little bit further, because I think the harm is extraordinarily powerful, real, and ought not to be discarded there. There's also Holocaust survivors and other, from a Jewish standpoint, who care about this, that believe that the healing component requires a proper and accurate and genuine, a valid understanding of the history here in order to properly heal from the atrocities of the Holocaust and everything imposed there, in order to also remove some of the venom and the power that this symbol has still for these hate groups. I think we've seen, in that video, there's some people that say it's still powerful, it's still what have you. Imagine if you could disarm those individuals there, as we've seen in some places throughout the world, what that power could have in terms of lessening the impact of Hitler's symbol that well after his death continues to hold weight. The majority also, of others here that see this, the ongoing hurt attached to this, it's all relevant there. And again, so why not just leave this as is here? I think we'll see that there's an ongoing harm done via this self-censorship in terms of, here's a picture in the bottom right that I actually took myself, having met, a Hindu. I live in, the greater Boston area, and that's actually my son's hands in his little New Balance shoes. He saw this motorcycle of, a person that we had met, parents of one of his friends, who had put, as you can see, it's kind of hard to see in this image, but if you're able to blow it up, there's a little red painted swastika on the front of their Yamaha motorcycle. And, oftentimes we would hear from people like this when you get to know, people from lots of different backgrounds that'll say that very often they're not able to do these things, or they feel ashamed of it. They're self-censoring their own culture and being able to express themselves in various different ways throughout the West as they go forward. And it's always a joy when I'm able to, say to people from these different backgrounds, oh no, don't worry, I'm not ignorant. I actually have a master's in this background. I've studied a lot of these things. You can, do that just fine. It's totally fine. Oh yes, and I'm Jewish, and go all the way back throughout Boston. So now, if we're looking at the Hakenkreuz, how it's it's likely not used nearly as often as a result, because of all these different things. But throughout other countries, in India and Japan and many other places, they actually use different words to distinguish between when it's good and when it's bad. And Japan, for example, we see that it's manji in the good cases, and actually Hakenkreuz is a word used when it's negative. And as we see that, this is in some regards kind of an inevitable, related piece that we have to look at, because as globalization continues its relentless march, the fact is that, where we could say, oh, well, they can do that over here and we do this over here, Well, yeah, if you have massive walls on every border, maybe, but ultimately, if you believe in an interrelated, open world, then I'm sorry, but you have to be aware that there's going to be people wanting to express themselves in all places. Ultimately, another component here that's critical of some of these images is you'll see that there's indigenous persons that have had to self-censor, and I mean, we don't need to get, of course, into the atrocities and even some would label genocide that has occurred to various different American Indians and indigenous persons throughout the United States. But a lot of these people use the swastika in all kinds of different ways across numerous different tribes across time and place, and have painfully had to, again, self-censor, and I've spoken to numerous of these individuals who have painfully self-censored yet again because of how they see it would be perceived to just express themselves with this all-important symbol. There's also legislation that's unfolded in a number of different places around this symbol, and in terms of mashing the word swastika with Hakenkreuz and not exactly understanding that distinction there. So let's now, that's some of the why, but let's get now into the actual history of why we're talking about this. Let's get into some of the history of the swastika globally. So the history of the swastika as a word was borrowed from Sanskrit. I mean, essentially a good luck charm, or the cause, the smaller piece, but ultimately it's an auspicious symbol. It's a good lucky component, similar to how we might think of as a lucky charm almost in a small sense, but something that's positive in all of its uses. The first use was in 1871 in English, and prior to that, Gamadian, as I mentioned, was actually used, which is from the Greek term. This is a symbol that's been seen all around the world. The next slide I'll show you speaks to that a little bit. But then from 1932 onwards, in the West especially, we started to see that things changed, and we'll get into why. It's beyond just the Holocaust component, but how the word was ultimately used in that context. There's an excellent book, perhaps the most impactful book, goes back to this symbol in 1895. A work by Thomas Wilson, and I have one of these original books in my collection that shows here a map of his study that was done in tandem with the Smithsonian that showed the symbol, as termed here, the swastika, used all around the world. You can see India and Africa and all through Europe and Asia and even in the Americas, both North, Central, and South. So, really dating back to those 1890s, even when we first saw some of the largest studies of this, we saw that this symbol had been used really everywhere. This is a stone called the Snodelev stone out of Denmark that was discovered in the 1770s, again, perhaps originating from Norse culture in the 800s, and clearly showing that this had been used as a shape and as a symbol with deep meaning across countless cultures. Even amongst Jewish cultures, we saw that ancient swastikas were used in mosaics on the floor of synagogues in ancient Israel, and in doorways and in frames, in all sorts of different ways as a symbol that clearly had a positive meaning. In both a contemporary and ancient sense, we see that the Buddhist swastikas, and also termed as manji, have a particular style to them and have been used broadly. The Hindu swastika, as many of you coming from CoHNA, of course, might be familiar, of course, and then the Om symbol here is clearly of very high import. Jain swastikas, both ancient and sacred up to modern times, key symbolism that's used really throughout all sorts of different imagery there. Now, swastikas in the West, in the pre-Nazi era, were also somewhat ubiquitous. So we see that across, these are actually all, items that I've come as part of my research into my collection, so that I've able to, from a firsthand, see a lot of what's available out there as I was doing this research. And there were swastikas really all up and down the spectrum, from pharmacies to playing cards that were used in, this is the Cincinnati Playing Card Code, very large companies that had used this. Coca-Cola used the swastika as a good luck symbol. Get a bottle, and then also would have, a good luck component. And this was not unique to, non-Jewish groups. There was, this is a Benji J. Goldstein here as a coin saying that's, again, you can use the swastika, get $1 off your purchase of 20 or more at Greenberg's, and I verified these are, actual Jewish-owned businesses, 50 cents on a $10 cash purchase at Greenberg's. You get this discount as well at Rosenblum's. as well. We clothe the family, and here's a good luck symbol, and you can see how it's clearly associated with the more traditional Western symbols of good luck, the horseshoe, the wishbone, the four-leaf clover, and so on and so on. And it's not just the actual symbolism of it. Even the word itself had the same connotation. A coin here with the Star of David or Magen David was labeled as the swastika around it here from this same time period, again in that pre-1930s time frame. As we all know, then of course the history of the Hakenkreuz in Adolf Hitler's symbol from the early rise in those 1920s when they came about as a party, and then 1933 when they came into power through to 1945. We see there's an interesting piece here that's very important to note in this discussion. So the New York Times and Ralph Manheim. Ralph Manheim was the first translator of, not the first translator, but one translator, I should say, of Mein Kampf. There was an earlier translator, actually, E.T.S. Dugdale, of what was called My Battle, a similar translation there. But speaking to actually the New York Times in the 1930s, or around March 19th, 1933, there was an article that first spoke of the swastika as a symbol of the Nazis. And this was unusual because prior to that point, it had always been translated from the German Hakenkreuz as hooked cross. And all of a sudden, they seem to be moving away from that as they became a more powerful threat. There's speculation as to why this occurred. Perhaps, again, this is pure speculation here, but there's some reasoning that it might have had to do with the fact that as Hakenkreuz could be translated as hooked cross, that perhaps certain powers in the West did not want a Christian or otherwise cross association with this symbol as the Nazis became an ever more menacing threat, throughout Europe. And so then it's at that point that suddenly we see a switch from this term being called the Hakenkreuz or hooked cross to swastika. And again, prior to that in the 1920s, we even saw that the Nazis had been referred to in some instances as Hakenkreuzlers, in the same way that if you're from Berlin, a Berliner, so a person of the Hakenkreuz and everything there. And then Hakenkreuz often was also translated as hooked cross. But beyond that, speaking to these translations as well, so we saw the earliest translation of, and I have all these in my collection, first editions here. So My Battle was the first translation of this book of My Struggle, as it's now commonly termed. But from 1933 by E.T.S. Dugdale was translating Hakenkreuz more literally, and I would argue correctly, as hooked cross if you're going to translate it, or Hakenkreuz if you're not going to, but not as swastika, which is altogether a symbol from various other areas. Now, there's a later edition in 1943, so this is quite a good deal later, and near the latter part of the war almost, but very clearly when the Nazis were not viewed as a neutral threat in any sort of sense at all, but something, the war had been going on for some time now. And this later edition had translated most famously by Ralph Manheim. This is the edition that you could find on, Amazon or anywhere else today in this black binding. And this was used when they used swastika nearly exclusively as the translation, not hooked cross or Hakenkreuz. Some other quick and highly relevant facts on Hitler in Germany. Hitler's never documented as having used the word swastika himself. He used the word Hakenkreuz, and it's not as if he would not have been aware of swastika. This word would also have been used. He was choosing deliberately that word over any other. And most likely because of the potential for the Christian connotations. He grew up in Austria, and in his own native churches and churches in that area, there's even actually Hakenkreuz, whereby they have a bit of a curved look to them and an aesthetic, but are a variant of a cross there in terms of the symbolism that militarily might have been on the escutcheon of crusaders and other warriors throughout Europe in different contexts there, but certainly as a symbol giving divine protection when going into war, drawing on that Christian, but also that violent connotation. In Germany today, in a contemporary sense, the Hakenkreuz is actually banned from being displayed. However, and it's understood as distinct. The swastika is understood as a separate symbol. And that is permitted when, and I quote directly, civic education, countering anti-constitutional activities, art and science, research and education, and the coverage of historic and current events or similar purposes. In those contexts, it's permitted according to their criminal code. So given these similarities between the shape, the Gamadian and everything there, and given how different these symbols are in their ultimate meaning, what are we to do? Well, it's important to know that always and everywhere when you see these colors, this is a Hakenkreuz. This is the symbol as negatively as understood as a symbol of hate, as a weaponized symbol. That is always true. And even in Japan and other places, if you saw these colors and these banners, this would be a Hakenkreuz in that sense, not a manji, not a swastika, or even a Gamadian. Context is the most important element in all of that, and that goes to whether you see this scrawled on the side of a building, on a door in a hateful sense, on a mezuzah, which is the scroll Jews put on our doorways as a good omen and as warding off negative components. So whenever you see this in a negative sense, it's very clearly used and should be understood. And the term we ought to be using is Hakenkreuz there. Now, the swastikas in the West, again, there isn't this distinction made, and this is a fairly new understanding in some respects within academia. There was this understanding to some extent that there were both, but I think a lot of that added history and that nuance in terms of the translations and the New York Times piece and how these two pieces were understood, and again, perhaps some of the somewhat nefarious intent that might be inferred there. A lot of that is still a developing piece within the academic world, the Holocaust and genocide space, and in the historian space more generally. So I think thinking of those as separate is important, but it's still somewhat new to those overall in that area. So it's important to proceed with some patience. But questions going forward in terms of if the swastika is redeemed, I think it's important for us to ask, what would be the effects? What are we going to deal with there? Is violence likely to increase? Obviously, are there costs here, or is it going to decrease, or would it be neutral? Ultimately, when any of these sorts of decisions are made, that sort of should be incorporated beyond that initial, visceral or guttural reaction there to anything on this nature. What happens to this symbol when if it is no longer, weaponized, if it loses its venom? Is this also, an important question there? Because what we have seen in places where it is banned is that oftentimes those color schemes and other symbols quickly crop up, whereas thankfully, I would say in places that have a strong element of free speech, both in their law and in their culture, you don't see people, marching down the street very often in, many places in the United States and otherwise where it's legal with, banners of Hakenkreuz on them ultimately. But you do in certain other places here, and there's a number of examples having people use very similar look-alike symbols where it is banned. I think there's a little bit of this forbidden fruit effect in play, whereas something becomes more forbidden, it becomes more appealing, and a similar look-alike with a lot of that same power is not difficult to convey. So I'd argue there's obviously a duty for us to, quote, never forget, of course, but at the same time, we have to be considerate to not trample on the other rights of others in the process. And this is a picture here of the inaugural Hindu-Jewish relations component in 2007, a summit. And then, what you can really do about this. I think it's an important piece, as I've already mentioned, is to, differentiate in word choice between the Hakenkreuz when, it's clearly contextually understood negatively, and swastika when, even the slightest bit of context, if it's red paint on the, the front of a motorcycle and it's, it's not adorned with, any other it's a skinhead imagery or anything of this effect, I think you can very quickly and easily and naturally interpret this positively. And understanding that as a distinction that's important. If you need to translate it, I'd say use the English hooked cross, but often having that German connection because of that very powerful origin story. I think keeping Hakenkreuz in place has been something we've seen adopted fairly universally of anybody who's done their due diligence. So using Hakenkreuz is I think the better term. I also always throw out a little plug here for T.K. Nakagaki's book. You'll hear from him, I believe, later. But frankly, this is an excellent testament. It's a primer to get people started on this subject. There's a lot of great, fully sourced information, both with the primary and secondary sources around this subject matter, so you can kind of get started on this and be able to speak to it more intelligently with a single read. I'd recommend that. Then beyond that, hosting interreligious events. I often speak with Jewish communities and as a Jew work with my own shul and others. But ultimately, there's so many different groups that need to hear about this more and work with each other on this. Buddhist, Jains, and so many, Hindus, of course, we're speaking with today and others. Now, I like to close with knowing that, of course, we must remember that fear by itself cannot prevent another Holocaust, but disarming extremists and removing the pain that their symbols of hate inflicts just might. All right. That's what I got.
Thank you, Jeff, for that powerful presentation. Really appreciate, there's always something new to learn when you actually, do this. So once again, thank you, and we'll take questions a little bit later. What I wanted to do is basically welcome our two youth panelists to give their thoughts. First and foremost, I'd like to welcome Naomi Shah. Naomi is a student enrolled in an 8-year direct medicine program at VCU/MCV, majoring in chemistry with a minor in biology and gender study. In addition to her academic pursuits, she's a proud follower of Jainism and served as an Ella representative at the Young Jains of America. She has had leadership positions such as board member of the Rotaract Club of Richmond and past president of the Interact Club. And during her free time, she enjoys volunteering in healthcare research at a lab, practicing yoga, dancing, and also biking. She's also a member of the Jain Society of Greater Atlanta. So Naomi, please go ahead and share your thoughts. As a young Jain, what are your thoughts about the topic, the symbolism of swastika, anything that you have encountered on your own? So floor is yours.
Hi everyone. Thank you for this opportunity once again. So I've been given a couple of questions that I would love to answer. So as a young Jain, what importance does the swastika hold for me? So most importantly, as a young Jain, we call the swastika also known as satyo in our language, and that's always been an important part of my life. So the word swastika can be broken down into two different parts, su and asti, meaning, and both of them mean all as well. So whenever there was a first or a new journey that I was taking on, or start of a puja or any ritual, we always started by doing prayers and taking this red kumkum and putting it in water and drawing a swastika. And I still remember doing this on the door entrance of my own dorm room when I first started college, or even like buying my first car, and it reflects the attraction of good and positivity. Additionally, having attended religious classes called Patshala ever since I was a young girl, I understood that the importance of swastika as a symbol of Jainism. So often at the temple, we create a swastika out of rice, also known as satyo, reminding one that the ultimate goal in Jainism is to liberate the soul from the cycle of reincarnation and strive for permanent bliss. So each dot that you'll see in each arm of the swastika represents the 4 destinies of soul spaces while trapped in the cycle of birth and death, also known as gatis. So those are heaven, hell, which is also known as narak, human, which is manushya, and plants and animals, which is the Diryansh gati. And on the top of the swastika, you'll notice 3 dots, symbolizing right faith, samyak darshan, right knowledge, which is samyak gyan, and right conduct, also known as samyak charitra. And at the top, the swastika, which is a crescent with a circle, and that represents the abode of all the liberated souls. As you can tell, the swastika is very important to me in my faith, and there's so many other faiths that have mutual understanding about the swastika or the satyo, and that allows me to practice Jainism in the fullest of my ability every single day as a proud Jain. And another question is, have I really encountered this difference between swastika and the Nazi hate symbol? Do I get questions by my non-Jain friends, and what type of conversations I've had? So yes, this does happen. I'm familiar with the confusion between the two, and have talked to my non-Jain friends about this, and the different conversations that we've had. So what is really the difference? Why of the shape, and just what does it mean in general? So the only way that I've best been able to hold conversations and got through this is really explaining what our faith in all these religions and like the main difference between the two. Unfortunately, like history has dishonored and deemed the meaning of swastika with a negative connotation, forcing many to refrain or incorporate the swastika, refrain from incorporating like the swastika outside their homes and into their religions because of the fear of being victimized by social misunderstanding. So I really urge them to reflect. And one question that was written in a Young Jains of America, Young Minds article was, why should Jains, Hindus, and Buddhists be afraid to display a religious symbol tied to their people and faith history? So really reflecting on these questions that you may face, and then urge them to realize that the hooked cross is a flipped version of the titled symbols that's reflected the symbol on the right across the y-axis, while the Jain swastika is depicted in an upright position with or without the four dots. So there are a lot of different ways that, you know, they're depicted in ways that you can realize which one is a Jain Sathyo and which one is a hooked cross. So really the best way to spread awareness is being able, like being educated and being able to take that extra step and explain others when they might face any confusion. So that's all I had from my end.
Thank you so much, Naomi. I think that was a wonderful, thanks for sharing your thoughts as a young Jain. I think it's really important to capture young voices as we, look at this particular dialogue and carefully weigh the ins and outs and the pros and cons of what we are really, seeing and the impacts of it. So I really want to thank you for that. Next, I would like to welcome Ashwin Arab. Ashwin, here we go. Ashwin is a tech professional currently working with our CoHNA Youth Advocacy Network. It's a program that brings together youth and young Hindus from various walks of life to talk about topics that are impacting them, as well as how to participate in advocacy for the community. So Ashwin, please go ahead.
Namaste all. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for joining us here today and for Nikunj for giving me this opportunity to speak. As someone born and raised in the US, the swastika was always a symbol, a very clear symbol of our Hindu identity. You knew that if you saw it, it was probably at a temple, maybe someone bought a new car, or someone moved into their dorm room. It was admittedly something that we had a lot of trouble displaying because there was always kind of a fear in the back of our minds that we were going to be misunderstood. Especially in middle school and high school, so much of our experience is trying to fit in rather than trying to stand out. And we knew what it meant, but we did not feel capable enough to explain it to people without feeling that, we might be misunderstood. I was raised in Chinmaya mission. So we, had these really huge festivals, and, we decorate stuff, and there's lots of people dressed up, and there's symbols everywhere. And, we would draw the swastika in something called rangoli, which is like colored powder in, all these really beautiful designs. And, sometimes you put it in front of on your front porch or on the sidewalk. And, you're in your neighborhood, your neighbors are out and about, people come by, they ask, and they, are a little bit hesitant, right? They know that their brown neighbors are probably not white supremacists, but, they want to make sure. They're like, hey, what is this symbol? What is it being used for? And they may have some understanding of it, but I think instinctively, there is an understanding that it's something different than what Hitler used, but they don't know enough about the history to be able to confidently say, okay, this is the swastika and the other symbol is the Hakenkreuz. And I think, part of the immigrant experience is, keeping our heads down and not saying anything. But what I've noticed over the years is that we underestimate the warmth that comes with this kind of dialogue. And so as I've gotten older, I've had these kind of difficult conversations as they've crept into the mainstream. And I have noticed in my generation that there is definitely a growing openness to talking about it openly and wanting to even go further and say, not only, let's say, tolerate the symbol, but to disarm it, like the way that what Jeff was talking about earlier. I wanted to tell you a quick personal story. Diwali last year, I was walking around my city in Northern California, and one of the bookstores, which is actually run by non-Indians, they actually decorated their front stoop with that same rangoli that we would decorate our homes with when I was younger. And I was really curious. I was like, where did this come from? How did they know to do this? Where did they get this experience from? And I asked them about the symbol, almost as if I was one of those people who was disapproving of it. And, it was really warm experience where they just kind of lit up and they were super happy to explain the symbol to me in a very compassionate way. And it's stories like these that really give me hope that we can continue to have these discussions and move towards a greater understanding about the swastika generally. So namaste and thank you all.
Thank you very much, Ashwin, for that. I think this was a very important point that you bring up, that as you can see, new generation the dialogues are changing, and it was a pleasant experience for you to see that. I have seen that myself in some places, so I'm really happy that you had a similar experience. So thank you very much. Next, I would like to welcome Greta L. Bogan. Greta is a psychotherapist, educator, poet, and a Holocaust survivor. She's a licensed clinical social worker with a master's degree in social work from Hunter College in 1977 and has postgraduate training from the Ackerman Institute of Family Therapy. She attended the International Himalayan Institute for 15 years and was affiliated with them as a clinician at the Center for Health and Healing at East West Bookstore in New York City. Her earlier work includes family services, adoptions, leading women's groups, counseling Holocaust survivors and their families, as well as new immigrants. Greta has been in private practice since 1994, guiding families, couples, and individuals. Greta is now committed to spreading the lessons she learned from her journey of suppression and survival to inner strength and deep love for the world around her. Since becoming involved in Holocaust education and the Museum of Jewish Heritage, Greta realized she could use her poetry as a powerful tool to engage the youth and her students to let them become spokespersons of her poetry. And we also had the opportunity for Greta to start to talk about this as a Holocaust survivor, about the swastika versus the symbol of Hakenkreuz, and the interesting journey that she has gone through, having had conversations with Dr. Nakagaki and understanding the perspective. And recently there was a very nice article in the Associated Press about the work that we have been doing around this education. And Greta was featured in that as well. So it's a great pleasure to have Greta join us. So Greta, please go ahead, share your thoughts.
Well, I am very touched that I'm included in this important afternoon conversation about one subject of many that we have to look at, right? Where hate is coming from, how it's promoted, and how hard it is to clean it up, right? So thank you, all of you, singularly as a group, as the organization. After your very lengthy, detailed introduction, it's hard for me to talk. So let me briefly tell you that in 1938, Austria was annexed to Germany, March. I was 5 months old. I was the youngest child of 4. And the Jewish people fled all over the world. Our family landed in Hungary. I was 7 years old when the war was over. I survived in Budapest by hiding. And it had to do with very special people who risked their lives, like Raoul Wallenberg, the Swedish diplomat, who saved half Budapest Jews. Myself, I was saved by Gabor Stello, a minister, a Christian minister, who had the job to collect children who were running around the street without parents, Christian or Jewish children as well. And due to their heroic efforts, I'm here today. When I was 7 years old after the war, only miracles could keep us alive because there was no food, there was no family, there was no home, everything was bombed out. And yet, when that time I was 18 years old, we were able to go back to Austria, my birth state, country. And by 19, I was in New York, a married woman. And by then, it's like God was guiding me, always to do something to help. And automatically, while I had babies, I had to get a social work degree. And my first job was with Holocaust survivors. I wiped tears, I fed them, I helped them as much as I can. But in this process, what I realized that even Judaism is not giving me all the answers why the world is the way it is, why I had to watch from very early on so much cruelty and suffering, helplessness. And I never felt helpless. Something always guided me. So even as a young woman with little kids, I was in school. As soon as I graduated Hunter College, I had to study. I felt like I still know nothing. That's how I landed up in a Hindu center. So I started to study deep teachings. It's not just yoga meditation, there is more to it, right? The practice, the belief, the search. And 15 years later, I started to go to friends to Thich Nhat Hanh's headquarters in Plum Village near Bordeaux. And he became everything for me because he has the answer to all what we're talking about. Because there is something we have to move forward to. We're talking very concrete right now. But if we step back and truly look at humanity from a higher place, swastika is very important to work with, but I feel I'm already moving to see it in a less dangerous place because the young generation already not so affected by that. So I'm focused more what the future generation needs from us and what they need from us more even than talking about swastika is to see that hatred was created, but we don't have to continue. There are ways to redirect them by self-development. And you know, you have children, you can see that we, the grown-ups, are still so wrapped up. What is hatred? We know what is hatred. We know what the Black people still not being equal today. And all these things I think about and I watch, but I say the young people have a different makeup, different DNA. And we have to be very hopeful and help them to feed that they will do so much better. So we won't have to study swastika so hard the way we need it. We need it now for my community, for the general public. But 10, 20 years from now, I think it's not going to be affecting people the same way. I want to go back a little bit about help you with swastika. So when I met TK in 2011, and he approached me very gingerly. He was very clever. You know, first he just said, I would like to involve you in my dissertation, Interfaith. He doesn't know much about Judaism. Of course, I'm deeply Jewish, meaning that I grew up as an Orthodox girl, and I'm still studying Judaism even today, because true religion teaches you a lot. And when he told me slowly and gently what the topic would be, the dissertation, I was like floored. I had no idea at that time that swastika was a blessing. And to me, that's still very embarrassing. I'm still embarrassed that in all the studies that I did, all the information and people, and I went out a lot, until DK came into my life, I didn't know. And now it feels very important, of course. I say it's very important, and it's very important for me to know it's a blessing, because now I have a symbol that's a blessing for me too, because I always relate to the good things. So I was able to let go of the swastika that I grew up with, and still being used, trying to frighten us. But it wouldn't do it for me anymore, because I already in the futuristic feeling that has no effect on me anymore. So for the young people that I always tell Jeff, TK, we're trying to just show and support their positive look on life, and not to emphasize, right, what the older generation feels about swastika.
Thank you, Greta. That was powerful, but keep, any last thoughts that you have to share?
Yeah, I'm trying to get into my thinking again. I was too much in my emotions. May I read just one poem, short poem?
Go ahead. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This is what a dreamer I am. Listen. The poem is called My World. In my world, guns transform magically into palm trees. In my world, bullets become Honeycrisp apples. The sound I wake up to each morning is the sound of hummingbirds. The sound of the city traffic is the sound of Niagara Falls. In my world, my needs, big or small, are fulfilled by simply thinking of them. I know you doubt me. I know it sounds foolish. I do not care, because I know I am the creator of my own happy land. Thank you so much. And I appreciate you listening to me.
Thank you so much.
Many blessings.
Yes, and that was powerful. Very touching story of how you actually personally experienced, but your healing process, and how you are actually letting people heal as well, helping people heal. Because as you say, in order for us to create a better world, we need to heal, and we need to understand each other's perspective, and just move forward, because hate can only be overcome by not letting them empower ourselves. So I think it's really, really critical that we look at that. So thank you very much for your comments and remarks. Next, I would like to welcome Rabbi Dr. Alan Brill. We're going to go into sort of our next panel of adult, sort of like after Greta, a series of speakers / panelists, and we'll have our question and answers towards the end. Rabbi Dr. Alan Brill. He is the Cooperman Ross Endowed Chair for Jewish Christian Studies at Seton Hall University, where he teaches Jewish Studies in the Department of Religion and Jewish Christian Studies graduate program. He specializes in interfaith theology, Jewish mysticism, modern Jewish thought, and modern and contemporary Jewish thought. Dr. Brill received his BA, MA, and ordination from Yeshiva University and his PhD from the Department of Theology at Fordham University. In 2014, Dr. Brill won a prestigious Fulbright Senior Scholar Award for research and teaching at the Banaras Hindu University, Varanasi, Uttar Pradesh in India. During his award, he taught 2 graduate level courses in India. Dr. Brill was also awarded a Dorset visiting fellowship for 2 extended stays at Yarrington Manor at Oxford University, UK. Later in March, we will also be interviewing Dr. Brill on his book, The Rabbi on the Ganges. So this is a very interesting book that he has written, which we don't discuss today, but we will be having a different program featuring him. So I want to welcome Rabbi Brill. I don't see, okay, well, let me spotlight him here. Here we go.
Okay.
There he is. Okay, hold on.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So it's tough following up Greta's very deep and profound presentation. I'm coming from a very different place. I never thought about the swastika very much. In 2007 and 2008, there were Hindu-Jewish dialogues in Delhi and Jerusalem, and the delegates included people like Swami Dayananda. And then there was a third Jewish-Hindu dialogue in 2009 in New York City, where I was a participant. And by the third summit, it meant, and we moved from just meeting each other to actually going to issues like discussing the swastika. And at the end of 2 days, the Jewish participants all affirmed after the presentation by the Hindu teachers that the swastika was a sacred and auspicious symbol of the Dharma, not to be conflated with the hateful symbols of Nazi swastika. I affirmed the difference, but what really changed my attitude was actually living in India for an academic year as a visiting scholar. When I lived in Varanasi teaching at Benares Hindu University, I almost rented an apartment in an apartment complex in Lanka called Swastika Towers. The swastika decorated stores, decorated homes, was a sacred symbol in the Jain Ghat. The symbol was all around, and I just got used to it. On cars, on tuk-tuks, and offices around the university. There was a Rangoli in front of every apartment in my building during festivals. The swastika in India, meaning as much as we're making distinctions here, I took note of it and took pictures, went in almost every which direction and every which angle. Nobody was particularly careful about the angles of it. And there were many forms of the swastika that I saw all around me. But the fact that I saw it in all these Diwali decorations in Rangoli, they were clearly part of festival decorations. And so seeing its use in India, I came back to the USA with a changed attitude. And I also wrote a book explaining Hinduism to Jews. So if I share my screen for a second, I mean, nothing that I did endorse, but if these pictures are now all over your neighborhood, and you're walking down a staircase in your building, that basically people are making these sort of designs, you can't get angry and you can't misunderstand what their goal is. I mean, I'm walking to work, and this is my path, and it's all in love for the festival and the festivities. It's clearly not in any way a Nazi symbol. So going back to where I was and then coming back home, I started looking into it. As been mentioned before, the swastika is at least 2,000-year-old sign. It was used in Jewish synagogues in places like Ein Gedi and Ma'oz Chaim. There are ancient synagogues that have the swastika decoration. It's actually a Greco-Roman design pattern called a double meander. It's used in 1920s subway stations in New York. And for some reason, people don't get scared at the 96th Street subway station in New York City. That in 96th Street, it's got to have swastikas the whole way around the subway station. And it's already been pointed out how Coca-Cola, Boy Scouts, and there's even a matzah company, matzah for the Jewish festival of Passover, that called Swastik Matzot, that came out in 1914. So I got used to it. But at the same time, I had to acknowledge the rise of Nazism. The USA turned away from this natural symbol that already in the 1920s, already when the Nazis were only a small party, there was already a turn that Americans were not going to use the symbol. There's a very famous declaration by Native Americans not to use it on their crafts anymore in order to show that America does not support the Nazi side. And the war left us a legacy that every hooked cross is scary, that every hooked cross is a sign of murder and hate. Many people won't buy old houses that still have the design in the tiles. And I know many Holocaust survivors and their descendants that are scared when they see the symbol, even in contexts that are clearly not hateful, like kitchen backsplashes in an old home. But that's a question of education. The real issue now is that anti-Semitic acts are on the rise, and anti-Semites still love using various forms of Hakenkreuz, of hooked cross. They've changed them. If you've looked at all the new forms, they've changed them to look in all sorts of things like axe heads or various forms of the black on red with some sort of shape in the center. And that is still a live issue, and that it still takes a form that one anti-Semite or white nationalists identify themselves to another using the swastika. And the biggest problem really is that every other week, the swastika is still painted on synagogues and Jewish communities in order to inspire fear, hatred, and bigotry. And that is from people who do want to inspire hatred and bigotry. What can be done? First of all, things change, times change. When I grew up, Jews coming from Europe were equally scared of the crucifix. It's hard to think that now that the crucifix to Jews was a symbol of anti-Semitism and violence, and of the armies who had crosses on their uniforms when they killed Jews or preached against Jews. And so clearly my parents' generation did not like the crucifix any more than the swastika. Now I teach at a Catholic university, Seton Hall, and many of my colleagues teach in Catholic universities, and we really don't pay attention to the fact that there are crucifixes up. We do not think the Christians are then going to come out with swords and kill us. Time has healed. What do I think about the swastika? Well, bring people to India, or that there should be more public festivals. Let's bring this out into the open. I know we've had many of these online dialogues or in-person dialogues, but have some major American Jewish leaders or Israeli leaders pose with a swastika at the Diwali festival. Have a photographic campaign to educate people. Send Diwali greetings every year with a swastika so that people see it. Let the Dharma community invite Jews and others for Diwali celebrations. Make it a point that it becomes used to it the same way I became used to it in Varanasi. Let us become used to it, at least here in New Jersey, where there's a large enough Dharmic community in order to make it every day. And let the Jewish community and everyone else see how the swastika serves as a decoration, an auspicious symbol, and even a religious symbol And over time, I do think over the course of the next generation, people will get used to it.
Wonderful. No, thank you. And it's insightful to hear that given your background, I think it's really, really critical that someone like you can, help us understand kind of how the community works, yourself, Jeff, Greta, etc., and see how the Hindu, Buddhist, Jain, Jewish community, Native American, everybody comes together to start continuing to create that understanding. As you said, over the times changing, symbols that may be misperceived as hate symbols can then be changed to symbols that from an understanding perspective. So I really appreciate your insights, Rabbi Brill, on that.
Dropping me down in Varanasi was a very quick, lesson in the swastika. But you drop whole Jewish communities to come for Diwali to Iselin, to Edison, to other places, would certainly serve that function.
Yes, absolutely. And we have a great community here, so looking forward to working with you on that too. All right, next I'd like to have Sri Anurag Jainji. Anurag Jainji is the entrepreneur and business mentor out of Atlanta. He is also a member of the Jain Society of Greater Atlanta. And he has agreed to kind of provide the Jain perspective on the sacred symbol of swastika. So Anuragji, please go ahead.
All right. Thank you very much for inviting me, Nikunj. First of all, it was really a good experience being in this webinar and panel. Hearing Jeff's presentation was so much informative, which I've never come across in my past so far. And hearing Greta's story was, it was so touchy, and the work she's doing to help other create awareness and help, which is definitely going to help a lot of people in the future. And adding to what Dr. Bill said, that this misconception or confusion can be reduced if we start integrating other community people with people who really use this as a symbol of well-being in life, and as we in different celebrations. And I guess what Nikunj and his team is doing is definitely creating more awareness. So it's a great step. Now, as far as a Jain perspective, what I will like to do is, again, it's more of an education, and we all have different meaning of what the swastika, or in us, we call it satya, and what it represents. So I'm going to share my screen if it's okay with you guys. All right. I hope everybody can see it now.
Okay. Yep, it's good.
So in Jain faith, swastika is not just a symbol, but it actually represents a journey of any being or any soul, from wherever we are right now to all different destinations. A soul can take birth, as we believe on reincarnation, and so here are the four realms, we call it. Okay, these are the four realms. So there's a soul can rebirth in, as we leave this body and go, into our next. We can either be in the we can either go to the heaven, celestial being, or we call it Devlok, or Narak, which is infernal beings, or people call it hell, whatever you call it. Then there is animal and plant kingdom, where we can get, take those bodies, or we can again take a human body. So most of the soul, as we in our journey, we can take birth in any of these four, we call it four realms. Now, the goal of being in a human body is not just to, it's like lot of in Jain faith, going to heaven is not the goal, and heaven isn't same as going to moksha or nirvana or siddhi. Okay, it's very different. Actually, significant different. We can only go to moksha from a human kingdom. We cannot go to moksha or nirvana from being in a heaven or being a celestial being. Now that's why you see that arrow going up from human or from a human kingdom. Now, how do we go that? So in Jain faith, we don't just use swastika or satya, we also use it with the dots, like you saw in the first picture, and a curve, like a partial moon curve on the top of those three dots. Now, what are those three dots represent? It's those three dots is, so when we are a human, we have to practice those three dots, which represents, again, lack of a right word in the English. We use right faith, right knowledge, right conduct. But in Sanskrit, we use the verb samyaktva, samyak darshan, samyak gyan, samyak charitra. And I don't, this is not a real right word. Right is not the real translation of samyak, samyaktva. It's so when we practice samyak darshan, samyak gyan, samyak charitra, is in short, in a single word, you can think of something called equanimity. When we have an equanimity feeling, that means no attachment, no hatred, and we live our life, means our conduct is according to that. That's the path to go to moksha or nirvana, which represent the top. Is a place. It's like a, it's just a representation where all the souls which gets nirvana, they go up there. And so in short, this is kind of a journey for all the souls from where we are right now, and what we need to do in terms of our faith, in terms of the knowledge, and in terms of the conduct we do through our body, through our mind, through our thoughts, to get ourselves to that position where we can be in the liberated soul, and we can go to the Siddhashila, we call it, on the top. But that's how we represent swastika, and it's very important. It's actually the whole journey of Jain faith. So that's what it represents. And thank you for this opportunity, and maybe we'll take the questions in the later session.
Wonderful, thank you, Anuragji. That was a great. I really like the visual depiction. So we need to continue use that to showcase the significance of the swastika in the Jain tradition. So thank you for that. Next, I would like to welcome the Venerable Shimbo. Venerable Shimbo Sunim is a Zen Buddhist monk and priest who serves as the abbot and spiritual director of the White Lotus Haven Zen of Connecticut, a fully trained and sanctioned spiritual director who has been providing individual spiritual guidance and support since 2002. He has over 15 years of experience in Buddhist studies and practices, including traditional Korean liturgical forms. Venerable Shimbo is a fully professed and sanctioned teacher, and we are so happy that this is the first time he's joining us in this important dialogue. So welcome. Please go ahead and share your thoughts.
Thank you so much for your kind welcome, and I want to thank Reverend TK for inviting me to this. I've known Reverend TK for some years now, and this is a real pleasure to be with you all and learn about so many different things that I didn't know. So thank you all for your presentations and for your sharing of your life and your practice. I'm trained in the Zen Buddhist tradition, and that comes out of Korea. And I think Reverend TK will talk a little bit about this too, in terms of his Japanese culture. But, the swastika is located all around Korea on temple buildings, and use on rites of passage and directions on to get to temples and things like this. So it's pretty well used. And the Buddha's teaching has the swastika kind of synonymous with the Dharma wheel. If you've seen the Dharma wheel in Buddhist practice, that symbol of the Dharma wheel, it is synonymous with that. It also represents the heart of the Buddha. So sometimes you will see the symbol like on the Buddha's chest, if you see a Buddha statue, which I think is really, really nice. But I wanted to share some other things with you. Before I took my vows in this tradition, I worked as a creative director in an advertising agency. And so my job was to come up with logos and branding. And I was very pleased to hear from Mr. Kelman in his presentation, and also Rabbi Brill about context and his trip to that he made to Varanasi. So thank you for those. I do agree, context is everything. And when I was working to create logos and symbols, we would have a graphic standards manual that was also created that went along with the symbol to really define what the context of the symbol should be. In other words, if you have a Coca-Cola logo, you wouldn't put it on a green background, for example, because it has red. I think that Hitler, unfortunately, was pretty savvy in the use of logo and context, unfortunately. So I think that from my point of view, that context is everything. So there's three things that I'd like to just offer for continued, reflection. The first one is that I think that our temples and spiritual centers should somehow have a place in the physical space that's dedicated to the education of the swastika. I think that we should have some kind of package put together, if we don't already, to give teachers in these different spiritual locations the resources to teach maybe a workshop or a program to educate folks who come in, and that this education should be happening once a quarter, once semi-annually, or once a year, or something like this, to keep some kind of continuity of education. I think that maybe a plaque, in addition to the proclamation, a nice plaque with a short history and saying exactly what the swastika is, maybe we can make that accessible to these houses of worship and practice, and to have that displayed prominently. And also, I think we played a video of Reverend TK at the beginning, to have a documentary to also share as part of this educational package would be really cool. In addition, I think in closing, because I've heard some really great comments today about the symbol and practice, is why don't we come up with some kind of metta prayer that we all use throughout all our traditions that is somehow attached to this symbol of the swastika, so that in everybody's different place of worship or house of practice, that we could all be sharing with our congregations, with our people, this kind of prayer of goodwill. I know that in Buddhism, we have the metta prayer, but maybe there's a prayer that we can come up with that we can all share together as one unified kind of thing. So again, context is really everything. And I'm just so grateful to be part of this discussion. And yeah, these are things to think about. So it's a big undertaking to try to reclaim the goodwill of the swastika, but I think it's already there. I think it's just gotten a lot of bad, press or whatever. So anyway, that's my offering for you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I think I like your suggestions. I think the Swastika Coalition that we have created will, they can take on some of these suggestions. I think some of them already exist in some form, but to formalize it, I think as a package to be then systematically distributed would be really a wonderful undertaking. So thank you so much for those insights. Next, I would like to welcome Pujya Swami Sarveshanandaji. Pujya Swami Sarveshanandaji is a resident Acharya for the spiritual head of the Center for Chinmay Mission in Dallas-Fort Worth. He's also the National Director of Chinmay Mission Yuva Kendra, which is CHIK in West, the youth wing of the Chinmay Mission West. Swamiji has touched many lives through his service, dedication, and loving presence. Being a monk of the Chinmay Mission, Swamiji's mission is to provide individuals from any background the wisdom of Vedanta and the practical means for spiritual growth and happiness, enabling them to become positive contributors to society. Since 1995, Swamiji has been conducting Vedanta classes, retreats, workshops, camps, and innovative youth programs that inspire young people. And he has been an instrumental, I would say, force in some of the dialogues we've had around the swastika and the Swastika proclamation and things like that. So welcome, Swamiji. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Nukunj. Namaste, everyone. Starting from Jeff, who presented it beautifully, touching personal notes from Greta, and Dr. Brill, when he said, these things should be introduced. I was thinking, why not take them all to Banaras? That'll be a great thing, wherein a cultural exposure. That was a very beautiful concept where we invite them into our festivals, take them to our places of worship, all the way back to India as well. As we expose and familiarize them to the practices and see how innocently it is invigorated into the culture and what it means, then there is an opportunity to raise above the fear of it. Knowledge alone can remove that fear. Without that, however much we try, it shall not remove that fear. It will be another forced environment, but I beautifully the concept that Dr. Brill just brought in, I was very touched by it. For the last several months, we have been gathering in this CoHNA effort about the proclamation of swastika and to differentiate it with the Hakenkreuz. The symbol and its symbolisms have a very deep gesture, a deep meaning in our day-to-day life. Whatever we perform, whatever we do, invariably we use symbols, and these symbols have a great meaning. When in an Olympic game, when the winners stand on the podium, receive their medals, and then their national anthems are sang, the flags are raised, and they stand saluting those flags. They're actually dedicating that moment in a symbolic gesture while saluting their flag to the entire nation. Similarly, here when we have this symbol, which for 1.4 billion Hindus, then the Japanese, the Koreans, and various other native cultures where this particular symbol that we are discussing about, which is the swastika, and its relevance, it comes from the way back from the Vedic culture. Swasti prajabhya paripalayantam, so goes the mantra, where the very auspiciousness, and it's not just the auspiciousness for somebody that believes in it or doesn't believe in it, it is the auspiciousness and well-being that is invoked for everybody in and around the world, to the entire humanity. That is the magnanimity with which that prayer is offered. Swastina Indro Vruddhashravaha, Swastina Pusha Vishwavedaha, invoking from all formats of deities that may this auspiciousness and well-being be granted to everyone. Fortunately, we have these Vedic literature marking its deep meaning, but unfortunately it has been, now it has to be decided whether it is mischievously done or purposefully done with an intent to distance it away from Hakenkreuz and to label it to a culture which is similar looking but far away from the European reality. That has to be realized. But today, when we can see that these symbols have, though they look similar, but they have a distinct and different meaning, as and when we move forward in trying to create the distance that swastika is of the meaning of well-being, goodness, good luck in various cultures, but Hakenkreuz definitely is not, because it is the Hitler's symbol of destruction. But when somebody who has gone through that experience, just like how Greta experienced, and she was explaining it to us, we fortunately in Chinmay Mission have a monk who has lived in Poland and escaped and taken to Canada and then came to India, learned this knowledge that is when she was introduced to the swastika, and how she felt emotionally disturbed, and when she approached Puja Swami Chinmayananji, and he explained the grandeur of its all-encompassing meaning. And as she got to know more about it, learned more about it, her fears that she outgrew, and then she's still there with us. She's still alive. She still teaches about it. Very recently, about 2 weeks ago, when I was speaking with her, she was going through this experience. And then Nikunj called me and said, hey, can you come and present? It just, as though divinely ordained, the sequence of events that happened in last 2 weeks, it just reminds me of what just Greta explained, that in knowing, in having that knowledge alone, this confusion, this fear born out of that confusion can be grown out of. And the best way to do that is to have a dialogue, is to have create an environment where these dialogues can happen. And the resistance towards, or the animosity towards, to call swastika as the greatest symbol of destruction can be changed. And towards that, to the consistent effort that CoHNA is putting and Dr. TK is taken up, I think it is commendable. And this consistency is going to pay off. This platform of dialogue is going to pay off in reducing that fear and embracing on a grander totality where we touch each other's heart in utmost simplicity. And that is where auspiciousness can truly take a firm root. And that is where humanity can benefit in all its dignity. And today's session was specifically a different session than what I have attended earlier. It was heart-opening, not just mind-boggling, but a very heartwarming and heart-opening session. I really appreciate Greta for sharing your experience. It was heartwarming. Thank you.
Thank you, Swamiji. That was great. As you said, I think through the proper understanding and through the proper, sort of like approaches, as we are doing through consistency, we can definitely make an impact. And so I really want to thank you, because you've been consistently, agreeing to be there with the clarity and providing the Hindu perspective in a very authentic way. So thank you again for your comments. Next, I would like to welcome Dr. TK Nakagaki, of course. We also have a special guest, Grandmother Patricia Davis, which she will also be joining us for a few minutes a little bit later. But I want to welcome Dr. TK Nakagaki. Many of you know him, but I'll still give a quick introduction to him. He's a Buddhist priest ordained in the 750-year-old Jodo Shinshu tradition of Japanese Buddhism. He's a president and founder of the Heiwa Peace and Reconciliation Foundation of New York. He's also president emeritus of the Buddhist Council of New York. The Buddhist Council of New York is actually a co-founder with the Heiwa Peace and Reconciliation Foundation of the Swastika Awareness Coalition. So he's also Hiroshima Peace Ambassador, a Nagasaki Peace Correspondent, and honorary board member of the Interfaith Center of New York, an honorary president of the Sanghakaya Foundation of India, the New York City Police Department of Clergy Liaison. And of course, he's the author of the Buddhist Swastika and the Hitler's Cross, Rescuing a Symbol of Peace from the Forces of Hate. So welcome, Dr. Nakagaki. Comments are yours.
Yeah, thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes.
Oh, great. All right. So, yeah, thank you for the wonderful program today. I really appreciate. I'm sorry, my voice is a little bit low today, so I don't know, I just catch cold, or I hope not. And so anyway, these are also always the background that I use, simply because there will be a variety of swastika existed in the world. It's not just the only things that Hitler, as if in the West, Hitler is the only thing that represent, but that's not the case. So my presentation for today is basically, I'm going to share, various part I wanted to share, but the focusing a little bit more the fundamental part, why I started to do this project. And I think it's very important in the end. In the end, my project is basically differentiate all those two. So what's in the middle? In my mind, before, those two are separate. I was grew up in Japan. So, Jeff and other people mentioned too, but, Japanese, the swastika, or, is meaning, manji in always. So it's this one. And, but then for me, the Hakenkreuz, or Kagijuji in Japanese also, is the this one. So it's always have a clear distinction. But then the one time, actually, one of the reasons that I started doing this research itself is 2009. I attended the Interfaith Center sponsored Mashamea retreat, and so talking about the different issues, and that was a hate crime. And one of the speaker, actually expert of the hate crime, said swastika is a universal symbol of evil. And that actually particular sentence got me to get into this particular one. Simply, when I asked him the question, what do you mean by the universal symbol of evil? Because Jain, Buddhist use, Hindu use, Jain use, Native American, they all has those symbol. And then why can you say universal symbol? And then this expert said, oh, I didn't know. How can you say, expert is the one that don't know anything about other traditions, only know that this is you can even say universal symbol of evil. This is not right, So after that, the Hindu people there, because Interfaith, and it's about 100 people participated, religious leaders from the different tradition. So, the speaker should be aware of Buddhist here, Hindu, everybody's here. So we have a conversation, and we should do something about it. So that's actually how I started. This is something that I wanted to do for this particular conversation. And it happened to be following year, 2010. I became a student of the New York Theological Seminary, and for doctoral study of the multi-faith study, basically. And so at that time, they asked what I wanted to do for the dissertation, right? And immediately, so somehow it came out, my mind was this particular, dialogue of the so this, particular things about the swastika. Is a universal symbol of evil, that particular passage. So I just said, maybe can I do this as a project? So that's what this started, basically. And then since then, I know Greta has been very helpful for me. And actually, one of the reasons I asked her is because for me, it was the first time I feel more like a light after her talk with the Hibakusha survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Actually, I organized a couple years before. And then at that time, my image of the Holocaust is always totally dark, nothing coming up with the brightness, but like, bad, or something so sad and so terrible. Same thing happened to the Hiroshima, but then somehow Hiroshima Nagasaki part is always, try to make it peace, it's a peaceful gathering, and so there's some light, try to, change that thing, never again, so that we can have a better life. And so but then her talk was like that actually. So that's why I call her then to be my advisor. Without that experience, I don't think I may ask her anyway, Greta. So thank you. But then after that, I also decided to go to, prior to, or actually, in order to do this project, I just wanted to go to visit the site, like a Holocaust site. So, I went to the Auschwitz. Also, I went to the Treblinka. Many of the Jewish people in Poland, I guess Poland. I guess yeah. So they're all in Treblinka. So I went there too. And then also I visited all the museum as much as possible, Museum of the Holocaust, and also graveyard too. Actually, I went to the possible graveyard. Since I was Buddhist priest, so what I wanted to do when I get there is actually I brought the little incense, and then just bell, and so I just do the prayer first. And so then my feeling was I'm going to decide what I'm going to do with this particular project after what do I feel at that time. So one thing that came up my mind was a very interesting phrase was wonderful to know there's never again, like a Treblinka there, so the sign there. And so if that's the never again feeling is there, then I think it's better to have a healing process to process, going. But then one thing that I felt was, of course, feel very dark and then the very difficult sufferings and so forth. But at the same time, also I felt like a swastika itself, that is also buried together with the Jewish people somehow. And so and this is just the image, but then if I lift up the swastika from the ground and clean up, then maybe, Jewish people who are killed and, so that they'll also be sort of liberated. So that was the feeling. And then also I feel very sad to know, all the museum, everything, they have a, swastika even symbols listed. I mean, what I mean is Hakenkreuz symbols all over the place. But there's no explanation anywhere I found about the Eastern swastika. Nowhere. Meaning, even like they have a big swastika things, but no explanation of anything other than Hitler's. So as if, this swastika itself was treated not fairly, and then not really introduced to the Europe, and like here in the United States too. So anyway, so that's why actually I got some suggestion from the chief rabbi of Poland. So I went to see him, Michael Shudri, and he was in Japan actually, so he speaks Japanese as well, and he knows how the swastika is used in Japan. So that's why I went to see and talk to him. And then what he said was very interesting for me, because he introduced me to the people in Auschwitz. And so but at that time he said, right now Auschwitz may be totally black, totally, no light, but talking about the swastika itself, everything is bad and evil kind of things. But yet, if I can have even like a 1% of, Eastern swastika there, explaining at least. So that means it's not the 100%, all the bad one, but then actually 1% is little swastika opening, the good swastika. So then, okay, so that was my actually project there. So maybe I can just open even just a 1 inch, of light comes in, then it can be very successful. And then for me, I feel like this project for me, is already succeeded from that sense. So I'm very, very actually grateful, and all of you and then all of the people efforts that you make. And so, and then Jeff, you didn't talking about the sugar and salt. I mean, front page there's a explanation. I mean, to us. Written there, so I thought you're going to explain it, but anyway, I don't know, you left me to explain it, I guess.
Yeah, no, I meant to. I think I brushed over a lot of things. This talk could easily go like 3 hours, but yeah, for sure. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So anyway, so the one of the things that, I mean, in my book, I didn't write about the sugar and the salt example, because that's actually pretty much what I try to do now. Because for once the even like a same small, I mean, the what do you call it, powder, the white powder, sometimes people call it sometimes sugar and sometimes salt. So but then these are different sugar. I mean, just it looks the same but yet very different. The taste is different, the way that we use is different. So actually this distinction, we should be able to make it. Most of us, most of European people, American people, we can tell the difference between sugar and salt. Then why not to be able to tell the difference between Hakenkreuz and then swastika, because it's a same the shape, like a white color things, but yet tastes different. That we can learn. So so even that's my experience, right, when I was in Japan, because two things are totally different, but here it mixed up. The word swastika has both. I mean, that's impossible. I mean, how can it be possible to bring the word swastika to have both totally different meaning? I mean, that doesn't make sense, And then so that's simple, question that I have, and then we should be able to do, and then so that was. I think it's simple enough, but yet, of course, there's emotion comes with it. It's difficult from the first part, but then eventually we should be able to. And then for me, the Buddhism is always bringing the truth. We have so many fake news and everything nowadays too, but that confuse everybody and it create a illusion. And so when we have a dialogue or anything, we have to have a true facts. Truth is first, so that we can start having the dialogue. So one of the reasons that I did the book is simply because I wanted to have the truth about the swastika parts, as well as the Hakenkreuz. So my book itself is basically has a intention is like like this too. The swastika is different from the Hakenkreuz, and the Hakenkreuz is different from the swastika. You have to make a distinction, and so that we can really understand well for both sides. And then by saying this, Hakenkreuz, Hitler's cross, as swastika, we miss the cross too. How can it be possible talking about anti-Semitic symbol for this, Hakenkreuz? Because Hakenkreuz is a cross. Cross has been, as the Dr. Brill talked about, it was anti-Semitism symbol. So that's why this swastika, Hakenkreuz, is a anti-Semitism symbol, because it is a cross. It's a kind of a cross, and represent the same way for the Hitler, at least. So understanding all those things are probably very important, and to understand both sides. And so that's what I wanted to share. And lastly, I wanted to share two things. Since when I started, there are a couple of things that are very encouraging to me. One is actually Greta's another poetry. Actually, I wrote in my book here. For other people, I don't know. The most important things for me is this is encouragement for me to continue to this kind of project. So first one is actually let me introduce Greta's poem. The one that I liked was this, actually. Not in my dictionary, the title. In my dictionary, the word disgusting is replaced with the unique nature of things. The word hate is replaced with inquiry into the unfamiliar. Instead of revenge, is stated a dialogue with the one who hurt me. In place of word war is written building bridges of understanding between myself and others. So that's we want to accomplish too. And then also, amazingly, she introduced me another, Rabbi Nachman of Breslau. So his has a very short poem, but this one is also very encouraging to me. I only, maybe I will just read a couple of them only. But no, a person who walks in life on a very narrow bridge, the important thing is not to be afraid. And the highest peace is the peace between opposites. If you remember this, next time you meet someone who makes you uncomfortable, instead of heading for the nearest exit, you will find ways for two of you to get along. And maybe the last part, since develop a good eyes, always looking for good, will bring you to truth. Truth is the light by which to find your way out of darkness. Turn it on. If you believe that you can damage, then, believe you can fix. If you believe that you can harm, then believe that you can heal. Sorry, but anyway, kind of become emotional for me too somehow. And so, thank you.
Thank you. And
everyone. Thank you.
Yes, Swasti, and we acknowledge the hard work that you have done. It wouldn't be possible without your efforts on this one, especially for someone like me. Like I said, a few years ago, I learned about your book, and that kind of changed a lot of the things for me personally speaking, and your efforts. I had this idea, but it required sort of reinforcement to the idea, and your book was tremendously inspirational for that, and the consistent efforts that you have. One person, people say, what can one person do? Here's a great example of what one person can do to make a change. So really want to thank you and acknowledge you for that. And we have a wonderful guest with us as well, Grandmother Patricia Davis. She has been one of our panelists in the past, so I'm really happy that she joined us today. So just a little bit about her. Grandmother Patricia Ann Davis is an indigenous elder of the Choctaw Diné Navajo lineage. She currently is in the International Council of First Nations, Commissioner of Ancient Knowledge and Languages as a speaker and member. She's also an NGO representative of the World Yoga Community to the United Nations. She's an international educator who has initiated, trained, and experienced in facilitating her authentic indigenous ceremonial change process that she designed for wellness restoration. It is a cross-cultural, intergenerational, inclusive, universal in practice application and can be translated to any language. She's a whole systems designer specializing in peacemaking leadership who has worked as an administrator in health and human services for 20 years. She has traveled to 10 countries by invitation to teach and facilitate the ICCP that reframes thinking into an affirmative thinking system for win-win constructive decisions and outcomes. Grandmother Patricia, welcome. So happy to have you. Would love to hear your comments for a few minutes.
Thank you, TK, for giving me a voice today. By the way, our word for salt is ashi, and then for we say ashi, lakana, which is referring to the sweetness in life. It's not talking about sweet salt. To start with that. So that presents the context of when I refer to the natural order, that's the context that I'm speaking from. So greetings, everyone, and especially from the original people of this land. I'm born of the Mississippi Band of Choctaw into the Kachitni and Kia'ani authentic medicine people of the Diné Navajo Nation. I was born there, I grew up there, I'm registered there. And so when I speak of context, that's the container that the indigenous of this land, specifically, we would say Hojo, natural order, spiritual law that governs all of us equally. And so my focus is intention. There's only two intention, and that intention is either win-lose, and nobody wins. That's destructive and death-producing decision for those outcomes. Please listen. I call that inverse thinking system. We're talking in the affirmative thinking system. That is win-win, constructive, and life-affirming decision for those outcomes, which the symbols swasti from Sanskrit. And I have here, my brother made this mandala right here, the sacred self, and it shows that swirl there. That is the swastika in a rainbow form. And so it's our connection with Creator within creation. And so I may be saying a few words and interpreting them in terms of the spiritual law that governs us all equally. We're only interested in the unifying principles. I say that all the time. I'm only interested in the unifying principles in the affirmative thinking system. And we call this ehozen. That means holy thinking. That means our conscience and our moral reasoning. And so this symbol can be used accordingly in the inverse thinking system or the affirmative thinking system. Well, the whole universe is only supporting affirmative thinking system. And so what we call indigenous knowledge and wisdom is that saying that we're all a precious child of Creator within creation, and that within Hojo, which is all encompassing of the holiness with H and wholeness, there's no competing collectivities. There's no competing collectivities that represent competing ideologies. And so this symbol was used in our sand painting. And I appreciate the opportunity to educate on oral tradition in which general public does not have access to. It's not published in the literature. And please eliminate the use, I see it time and time again in written form into English. Whirling logs is absurd and meaningless. Do not use that term. I don't know where it came from. So in our ceremonies, remember that I was born in 1946, so that was after the war. And I want to point out that Jeff Kelman, using the art of making distinctions between the two types of crosses, I noticed that we would consider sunwise or clockwise Ashabikal, is with time and direction in the longitude and latitude of the whole planet, Mother Earth. And so this symbol, he showed an American Indian jewelry. I think that it was not an authentic piece because it didn't look like of the direction that our tribe uses. However, the Navajo rug and the Hopi gourd symbol that you used was of the direction that we are saying that is sunwise, clockwise, and I'll tell you why, and I'll tell you why. So that we have also experienced the atrocity of genocide in this country. And so when we see that symbol of healing, we could even associate the Christian cross with our own annihilation and our genocide, but we see it as the four directions in nature. You see, that's what TKU are saying, reframe your thinking in order to heal from this trauma and woundedness, that we don't remain in the trauma bonding. And so we want to make these corrections. And some of you were on a Zoom where I actually called it sorcery when we inverse. a symbol and its meaning away from the good, beautiful, and true for all of us universally. And so also that the notes I have for myself right here are that the ceremonies where the sand painting is of the elements and on the earth in which a person's sickness is lifted off. How is it? By miracle power of love and peace that it's lifted off a person when a person remembers, and reawakenings are inherent, the spark of divinity, inherent sovereignty. Of course, that's what the universe is supporting. So the healing ceremony, when I say authentic, that's real and profound and beautiful. And so we're all existing on this Mother Earth, and our Mother Earth is in the galaxy of this symbol, which is like the symbol of the swastika. And so it's representing that we're traveling with peace and truth, which is the only real power, and truth is also our protection. So thank you for this time to share precious knowledge and to say that our creation story first is about Indasya. Everything in the universe was created with a purpose. And then Nilya, it was placed in the four directions, from east, south, west, north, sunrise, noon, evening, midnight, spring, summer, fall, winter, white people, red people, yellow people, black people. We're saying nations. We're not saying races. We're saying a jewel, white shell, turquoise, abalone shell, obsidian, and jet. Every humane being is a jewel born within that holy circle. And there's a teaching place for us to live every day of our life throughout our whole life and make it safely. So basically, when we say the phrase Hojo Nahaskli, and we say that 4 times, it is this power and the beauty of the profound energy field of our existence with Creator, within creation, simultaneously. Thank you. And I was locked out the whole time, kept getting the notice that I couldn't turn on my sound or my video until the 11th hour.
Oh, sorry about that. I think it was because I think the panelist view was not turned on for you. So definitely apologize for that. But I'm really happy that you finally were able to join us and give us some comments. I think what you had mentioned, I guess truth shall, persist, or truth shall win. I think there's a very profound saying, Satyameva Jayate, in Sanskrit. But there's also not just Satyameva Jayate, the truth shall conquer or truth shall win, but there's also Satyagraha, which means the insistence of truth or the persistence of truth. Because without persisting of the truth will not alone conquer, or truth will not alone win. We have to be the instruments for that truth. And I think all of you on this panel and the efforts that we have been putting together have become the instruments of truth and sharing that knowledge and greater understanding. And I really, really appreciate, on behalf of CoHNA and the Swastika Awareness Coalition, for the panelists to join us today and sharing their insights. This is a beginning of a great journey that we have been continuing on for a while, but more and more players, more and more people are joining this journey and sharing their deep insights from a diverse perspective. So from the bottom of my heart and on behalf of CoHNA, as well as our partners in the Swastika Awareness Coalition, I want to thank all the participants as well as the panelists. As we say in our Swastika Awareness Coalition, Swasti, because that's one of the words that we have started to use. So as we end today's session, I would like to say Swasti, Swasti, Swasti. Thank you all for joining today.
Thank you. Swasti, thanks so much.